Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me for a quick chat about the most recent book that I finished. It is called Sistah Vegan. The subtitle is, oops, got a glare. The subtitle is Black Female Vegans Speak on Food Identity, Health, and Society, and this was edited by A. Breeze Harper, PhD. So, first off, let me just shout out to Lantern Books, who published this back in 2010. If you saw my previous book chat immediately prior to this book, which was the book chat on Why Homer Matters, you would have seen me go on a bit of a rant against Macmillan, the Macmillan Publishing Group, which is this multinational worldwide major publisher who couldn't somehow manage to put out an electronic edition of a nonfiction work that had footnotes in it, number one, and then the footnotes actually hyperlink to the back where the note actually is. There were numbered notes in the back for that edition from Macmillan Group, but there were no footnoted notes in the chapter, so they cut a major corner with that. This was published by Henry Holt Books, which is a division of Macmillan. But Lantern, this edition of this electronic edition of Sistah Vegan, had numbered footnotes in each chapter and had the notes nicely lined up in the back of the book, and there were nice little hyperlinks that worked between the two, so it made reading this nonfiction work a pleasure as opposed to an annoyance, which no matter how much I loved the content of Why Homer Matters, it was a poorly done electronic edition. So okay, that's the last. I promise that's the last rant I'm going to go on about that for now. All right, well, on to this book, though. So this book got recommended to me last year by a person that I know through social media, and I didn't put it on my 2016 TBR. I did manage to finish up my list that I had wanted to read for 2016 on my TBR, and so I was down to Wildcard Books. This is actually the last Wildcard book that I will choose for 2016, because in the month of December I will be doing rereads. So that'll be coming up in my next few videos, video chats for the month of December. But I didn't pick this up. I didn't put this on my 2016 TBR because I don't know. I thought, well, I don't know. I didn't have this sort of thing in my mind to add to my 2016 TBR. But I'm really glad that I went ahead and read this as one of my wild cards for this year, because I really found it super informative. So what this is about, it's a nonfiction work. It's a set of really essays and poetry and sort of maybe just narratives written by different women, different Black women, sort of around their experience of being vegan. I guess is the one thing you could say they all have in common, other than they all are also Black. This is I think they're all from North America. I'm not sure if there's Canadians in there or not, but let's say North America, because I think that's what was in the blurb. So they have this cultural shared experience as well, and they write on a number of topics. They don't always agree with each other, but I found each of the sort of installments, the chapters, which was in each individual person. I really found it really interesting, and I was able to engage in their writing. Obviously some more than others, but even if I didn't particularly agree with one or the other aspect of nutrition or of spirituality or any of these other number of things that they might talk on, I might not necessarily agree with, but I nevertheless found it very informative and very enriching to actually read. And that's one thing that I've learned about listening. I think that listening requires good listening requires the ability to hear other people with whom you disagree and not try to dismiss like it has to be your way of thinking or it's wrong. Like there's really not a right and wrong with most of these issues, and everyone's coming at these issues from sort of a different perspective. And so the women themselves, even though they have these sort of shared cultural sort of, I guess, anchors, they still disagreed on many things, but yet the book came together as really an enjoyable and enriching sort of set of essays and poetry to read. So, a few things that I took away from the book in particular is this notion of identity and how much food is wrapped up in identity. I read a book earlier this year and I did a video chat on it called Gulp. I didn't particularly enjoy the book that much, but one thing that I did take away from the book Gulp was how food and culture are really intertwined, and how our idea of what is good food or what is comfort food or what is the food that's part of our identity is really driven by culture, and how hard that is to change. And so one thing that these women had in common, of course, is that they're all African Americans, and so they come from a food tradition. So many of them, not all of them, because each one was different, but many of them do describe sort of their when they identified as a different in a different food, along a different food tradition, in this case veganism, what impact that had on them with their peers, with their families, with the people they know, with their friends. Some questioned, their blackness even, so questioned that, that they were giving up something that was sort of what many of them defined as being an integral part of, their identity as African Americans. So I found, when the women talked about that, I found that really interesting, because I don't share that as, I'm a white American male, and I don't have that kind of, we have, my tradition might have some identity with food, but it's not, I wouldn't say my identity itself is that wrapped up in food. And that's one thing I wanted to mention about identity, and being how your experience, really how, you look for others that sort of share your experience. And my own experience, as a vegan, I was talking to an online friend of mine. We were all in a group, and so this guy, he was like, "Is everybody here like in a profession? Is there no men here who are in trades?" I think he did heat and air or something like that, and so his experience as being a vegan was different than mine, because I'm not in trade. So his day-to-day experience sort of, was different. So, these kind of multiple perspectives is something that I'm extremely interested in, and I always try to look for them in things I read and things that I think about. And, so I found that part of the discussion in these essays and narratives, super interesting. The health aspect, they talk about this a lot too. And different women bring this up. Actually, almost all of them bring it up in one form or another, and they a lot of times relate it again to their African American identity. Which there's a set of health problems that are worse in African American populations than other populations. And so a lot of the women talk about, this sort of thing, rates of diabetes, rates of hypertension, and these sorts of things, and how they feel that, their philosophy of veganism is wrapped up in that. And then, another kind of cool thing was the sociological, kind of some of the things they talk about socially, as far as society goes, and how veganism informs their opinion on that. And with their African American experience, a lot of them share this idea of the oppression and the dismissal of non-human animals, like the struggle and the pain and the suffering of non-human animals, the dismissal of that by, a dominant culture or by a dominant force, meaning humans, and how they equate that, some of them, to their own social justice experience as African Americans, where they've been often, their experience has been to be othered, as separate from the main society. So I thought that was kind of cool, that sort of intersection, in their opinion, of the social justice around animal rights and nonviolence toward non-humans, and human rights and civil rights, and obviously justice for minorities like African Americans. So I thought that was real cool. One other thing I wanted to bring up, there was. I wanted to read actually a little excerpt from one of the poems. This poem is by Tara Sophia Bahna-James, and it's called Terror. And I wanted to kind of close this chat with part of this poem, the last part of this poem, because this poem, and actually sort of recurring through many of these narratives and these essays, was this idea of nonviolence. A lot of these women mention being inspired by thinkers like Dick Gregory, Alice Walker, the writer, Dick Gregory's philosopher, and a book by Queen Afua, I think is how you pronounce her name. I'm not real familiar with her. I did gather and looked her up. She wrote, it's around books around African spirituality and sort of that sort of view or philosophy. And the Alice Walker tie-in, she talks about womanism, which I had not heard that term either, and so I found that super duper interesting and would love to read a little bit more about that in the future as well. But on to the poem, this poem called Terror by Tara Sophia Bahna-James. So the point that she's making in this poem is, when we as humans, we sort of live in fear of being hurt, that someone's going to hurt us. And that's kind of our dominant default, that most people default to. Who's going to hurt me? How are they going to hurt me? When are they going to hurt me? And then, whenever you have that mindset and you switch that, and then how am I hurting others? And that becomes you become less fearful of being hurt yourself, and you start being afraid of how you're hurting others. That's what's addressed in this poem, and I just thought it was beautiful. So I'm going to close this chat with just reading the last part of this poem. Okay. The terror that comes from knowing you have the power to hurt, this is the greatest fear. Perhaps this is why our dogs can look into our eyes unflinchingly with unconditional love. It is not because they are too stupid to know that someday we may casually break their hearts, but because they are wise enough to know that they will never break ours. Ah, so beautiful. So I love that poem. I've highlighted that. I'm going to keep that, close to me for a while. I just think that's so beautiful, and I love that idea of switching your perspective, like not how am I going to get hurt, but how am I hurting others. So I think that's extremely important, and I love that. I will close with that. I will have lots of stuff coming up that I'm planning. My 27 TBR is almost finished. I have one more spot. It hasn't been for sure determined if it's going to be a fiction or nonfiction. I'm thinking it's going to be a fiction. I'm missing a short story collection. I don't normally read short story collections, so I'm thinking I might fill that last spot with a short story collection, sort of push myself. I also have my December month of rereads, which is the whole month of December. I will be rereading books that I've read in the past, and then I will have Wrap Up 2016, a couple of those videos coming up as well in the weeks to come, so stay tuned. Take care. Bye.